Yeah, they have. The first thing they do was grab the camera, the camera phone.
She's just the survey because of the planning board on.
And that would be. Yeah, she's seen it, yes. Right out of that screen. Actually, then the old one, about more. Think around the city in the morning. Water entryway. Mass.
Whatever.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our May 8th Portsmouth Town Council Town Council meeting. So we're good. We're just starting. We are good. That's right. Before we begin, I just want to go through the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency, 2 doors on your left and another one in the front of council chambers. We would exit the building, cross Middle Road, and await further instruction at the school administration building. And if we could all now stand for a pledge allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible. Okay, thank you all. All right, just a little housekeeping before we begin. We are streaming tonight's meeting. For those of you who are remote, watching via Zoom, there's an icon for you to raise your hand. If you're calling in with your phone, *6 will allow you to mute and unmute your phone. *9 will indicate you have a question. If you're participating remotely or in person tonight, if you wish to speak, please state your name and address for the town clerk. And with that, we'll begin with our roll call.
Mr. Katzman,
Here.
Ms. Abbott. Here. Mr. Gleason,
Here.
Mr. Hamilton,
Present.
Mr. Levesque,
Here.
Dr. Ryan,
Here.
Mr. Aguirre.
Here. Okay, President's executive summary. I do not have any updates. We did not have a executive session prior to our meeting. So we will just jump right in with our consent agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mr. Katzman,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton.
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Next, we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. First, we have peddler license for the mobile food establishment, new Java Jai Coffee Company, 11 Union Street, Jamestown. It's number 2334. And Poppin' Minis RI 134 Westwood Ave, Cranston, number 2337.
Move to approve.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mr. Katzman,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Next, it's a peddler license, new. We've got Kenneth Soers, DBA Gooseberry Leather Company, 11 Sleepy Hollow Road, Dartmouth, Mass, number 2331.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Katzman,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton.
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye, motion passes 7-0. And then next item is a vicular license, new Jack Steiner LLC, 13 1324 West Main Road, Portsmouth. It's 2338.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And then finally, we have the entertainment license. It's a Portsmouth Youth Soccer Association, PO Box 428 for the Portsmouth Youth Soccer Invitational Tournament at Gardner 70 Sports Complex, June 16th to 18th, 2339.
approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Move to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners. Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have minutes from our April 24th, 25th, and 26th meetings.
Move to approve as presented. Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And now we will move on to the town administrator's report. Mr. Rayner.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. The white paper regarding a hybrid waste management option and the comments that we've received will be presented to the council at the May 22nd council meeting. That white paper outlines a number of decisions which must be made prior to the issuance of a request for proposals. With regard to South Coast Wind, the Town Council workshop to hear public comment on the proposed South Coast Wind 1 project will be held 7 p.m. at the Portsmouth High School Auditorium on Thursday, May 25th. A note that we are now accepting nominations for the annual Portsmouth Award. Some of you may be aware that this award is an annual recognition for an individual, a local business, or an organization that exemplifies the best characteristics of and for Portsmouth, to include consistently demonstrating excellence in professional and community leadership, the exhibition of outstanding initiative, inspiration, leadership, and organizational skills, which produces significant results directly benefiting our community, has or is making significant contributions to the welfare of the community, or has freely given of their time and energy for the betterment of our community. Details will be posted on the town website and in a pending press release, and we'll accept nominations up through and including May 31st. Subject, obviously, to final approval of the town council's provisional budget, we are accepting applications for an assistant recreation director. Additionally, we are still seeking lifeguard and camp counselor applications. Applicants for those positions will be accepted until the positions are filled. Additional information and employment applications can be found on the Human Resources webpage. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner.
Mr. Rayner, and maybe one of the councilors knows slightly off the subject, but do you know if we still have a town cane issued to the oldest person in town?
Yes, we do. We're going to be advertising because the person who had it passed away.
Okay, thank you.
Next item, moving on, it's old business. It's a continuation, it's discussion and action of an alternative residential and commercial tax rate. At the last meeting, we had some discussion on this, and some additional information has been provided. I don't know, Mr. Rayner, do you want to kick off the presentation, or?
Okay, so at the last council meeting, just after the proposed budget for fiscal year 24 was provisionally approved, a motion was made and approved to have staff present alternative tax scenarios with various adjustments to the commercial tax rate. So to recap, expenditures of $71,431,755 from the general fund were provisionally approved for fiscal year 24, which represents a total budget increase of 1.92% over last year, and a $2.864 residential and commercial property tax rate decrease from 15,651 to 12.787 per $1,000 in assessed value. The council voted to maintain the tangible property tax rate at the current rate of 15.651 per 1,000 in assessed value. Go to the next slide, please. So here's a summary of what is currently approved. By keeping the tangible tax rate at 15.651, the residential real estate levy increased by 5.546%, and the commercial real estate levy decreased by 12.526%. What is not readily apparent here is the effect of a tiered tax rate on the classification of property. The tax assessor can elaborate further if needed, but the bottom line is establishing a tiered tax system requires combination properties, i.e. commercial properties with the residential component, and residential properties with 5 or more dwelling units to be taxed at the commercial rate. The effect on this chart is zeroed out because, as approved in the provisional budget, the commercial rate and the residential rate are the same, so there's no change really. So if we go to the next slide. So the first scenario. In this scenario, the commercial rate is kept at the current rate. By doing so, the residential real estate tax rate would decrease to 12.53 per 1,000 in assessed value, and the levy on residential real estate would increase 1.531%. However, the levy on commercial property would increase by just over 32%. So that's 15.561 for both the commercial and the tangible. And that's 651, I'm sorry. That's a typo in the commercial, that should be 651. So next scenario. In this scenario, the commercial rate is pegged near the midpoint between what the residential real estate tax rate would be if we kept the commercial rate equal to the tangible rate and the tangible rate of 15.651. If we were to do that, the residential real estate tax rate would decrease to 12.669 per 1,000 in assessed value, and the levy on residential real estate would increase to 2.659%. However, the levy on commercial property would increase by 19.51%. Next slide, please. And in this scenario, the commercial rate is pegged at the midpoint between the previously established residential real estate rate of 12.787 and the tangible rate of 15.651. So you go to the midpoint there. And if you do that, the residential real estate tax rate would decrease to 12.656, and the levy on the residential real estate would increase 2.557. However, the levy on commercial property would increase by 20.638%. Now, the tax assessor provided in your package some detailed analysis, and you'll notice that some of his numbers are off from mine, all within 100th or 1,000th of a percent. But that's because as we're doing this, you have to go through all the assessed values of all the properties over and over again. It's an iterative process, but the numbers that I gave you would give you the levy as approved in the provisional budget.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Questions from counselors? Ms. Abbott?
Yeah, can you go to the third slide, please, in your presentation? No, the one previous. So this is a comment that I made last time we were here, and this is exactly the concern, is that, we talk about the tax rate, and the tax rate is doesn't mean anything without the assessed values. And because the average change in assessed values was not the same from residential to commercial. Residential properties, the assessed values went up drastically more than commercial properties. What we're doing now is giving commercial property owners a 12% tax break on average, at the expense of a lot of people on fixed incomes and, in their homes. Then that 5.5% hit is a problem. So I don't think anybody really wants to increase tax rates on anybody and not target businesses, as, you know, has been hinted at, but I think it's not, I personally think it's not necessarily fair to have this discrepancy, and we could try, you know, try to find a better balance, maybe set it to where the commercial change is capped at the 4%, which is the you know, state cap, and then adjust the commercial rate to whatever that is. So, you know, I'm not sure there is a clear right answer, but I think there are a lot of different combinations, is an infinite matrix of numbers, obviously. And I think we just need to be considerate in our approach to this. I think if you could go to the next slide. I mean, that's clearly not fair either, right? You can't raise taxes on the commercial properties by 32%. But I think there's a few things that are important to consider, is that the reason this is happening is because a lot of our commercial properties are, you know, people working out of their home, that are, you know, professionals that now work from home, and I can afford a bigger house and raising property taxes. We also have a lot of Airbnbs and vacation homes that are being rented. Those are also, you know, business activities that are residential properties. So, you know, I think the intention here of considering this was not to target small business owners, is just to find a better balance between how, you know, how do we adjust this so we're not disproportionately impacting one segment of our population.
Thank you, Ms. Abbott. Mr. Gleason?
You want to go first, Lynn? It's up to you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
First.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Gleason. I circulated late before this meeting, so I don't know if you all received it. I sat and I gathered my thoughts together. When this was first proposed a couple of weeks ago at the meeting, last meeting, one of my initial comments was that I don't feel comfortable doing this on a whim. And I didn't mean that whim was from the person who proposed the idea, but for me, having not thought of this at all for that meeting, knowing that there must be circumstances and, you know, unintended consequences, and that I just had not had the chance to think about and think through. Having seen the proposal and all the work that went into it, and then this would require a change to our ordinances to implement, as I understand. Is that correct, Mr. Rayner?
That's correct.
And I don't know that we can.
For the
we do-
record, this was not my proposal.
I understand, but I just want to, I want to understand the circumstances in front of us are such that we would have to.
I didn't even hear that bus coming.
We would have to advertise to have a hearing to update our ordinances. So I'm not sure this is something that could be adopted now necessarily. If Council Member Abbott used the word balance several times, and that's exactly what I think we should be trying to do, is strike a balance, because if the commercial rate goes up too high, then Portsmouth will be seen as a less friendly place to do business. Commercial property rates may go down because of that. And we'd have to make it up on the residential property. So we would have the unintended consequence of raising residential property rates to make up for it. And on the flip side, of course, we want to make Portsmouth affordable as possible for those who have homes that they've lived in for some time that are now valued at a high value, but their incomes may not match what their now valuations hit. And so we do have some programs in place for exemptions and deferrals. And I don't know what state law allows for other types of programs that we could look at to provide the kind of relief we're looking for the residential property owners without just placing all of that burden just on the commercial property local business owners. I will not be supporting, I will vote against making any change, making the proposed change tonight, because I just don't believe we have sufficient information on what other alternatives may be and what all of the repercussions of adopting this change might be. For example, the ordinance talks about reclassification of properties, which would include now correct me if I don't have the right phrase, mixed properties or combination properties, right? Where a property owner currently owning property that is classified as residential, therefore paying the residential rate, may find their property reclassified as either a combination property or commercial. If, for example, they have, 5 or more units.
Yeah, so if there's a commercial activity that has an associated dwelling unit, we have that in town. I'm not going to name them specifically.
Mhm.
Or let's say an apartment complex that has 5 or more units, that would be classified as commercial rate.
Right. My point is just that there are a number of different repercussions and changes to how our tax structure would work by adopting this deceptively simple, we're just going to change the rate. Well, there's actually a lot that I think goes into it that would be a ripple effect from that. And I just don't think that, speaking for myself, I don't think the council has the information necessary to understand all the repercussions. I would support, starting on day 1 following the adoption of the budget, undertaking an effort to know what other types of programs are available. Could we fine tune and update the exemptions and programs that we currently have? Are there other types of programs we could adopt? And what are the repercussions of those? People have mentioned homestead exemptions, and many communities have those. We do not. And homestead exemptions, like any other change to the tax structure, helps some people, hurts others. So I think we need to know what all of those types of options we may have that could be implemented, that are available to us, and in a considered manner with input from residents, business owners, the spectrum of folks who live in town, given an opportunity to really provide our input and workshop that, so that come this time next year, we'll have a more robust set of information and data on which to make a decision.
I,
Okay, well,
Go ahead. He was first.
let Mr. Gleason go.
Thank you. First, thank you for your indulgence in supporting this at the last town council meeting. I want to thank Mr. Helfand and Mr. Kirk Kilpatrick for the work that they put into this. When I received the package on Thursday, I saw the 32%, the 29%, 20%, all unacceptable rates to consider to pass on to a commercial customer. So I did call Matt on Friday, and first off, thank him for having to do this work that I created for him, and found out that there is no magic computer that you can put this in, and it's done reverse engineered from a spreadsheet, so it's tedious. You know, that's what we have here in town, and maybe every other town has that. I really don't know, but I appreciate the efforts. And our conversation on Friday was, it's kind of confusing here. I thought we were headed in the right direction, but we're obviously not. And I don't want to see that type of increase on a commercial property. But trying to reverse engineer the mill rate maybe isn't the way to go. And maybe the thing to do is to look at a 5 or 5.5% increase on our commercial properties, similar to what we as residential property owners are going to see. And I said, I'm just one counselor. I can't authorize this, but if you feel like that's worth exploring, please do. And he did go through those numbers. I'll touch on that briefly. But, what I found was numbers make me silly looking at them on a piece of paper over the weekend. I don't know if anybody else looked at them to the degree I did. Maybe you didn't, Councilor Hamilton. But I didn't know there was also the Title 44, General Law 44.5, 11.8 that talks about tax classifications. And we would be, in fact, affecting classifications 3 and 4 that were discussed that have to do with 2 to 5 family units and apartment buildings. They would be taken out of the residential revenue stream and put into the commercial revenue stream. But probably the real thing that you really had to get to, and I only found it after speaking to Mr. Helfand, was the fine print at the bottom of page 4 that says since 2004, Portsmouth has been differentiating between residential and commercial property. State codes 3 and 4, which I just mentioned, have been considered residential up till now. And if Portsmouth goes to a tax classification system based on Rhode Island General Law XYZ, state codes 3 and 4 would then be classified as commercial. This would result in an $85 million shift of assessed value. So in my opinion, I have always said, you know, we need to give residential ratepayers a break. We need to raise our commercial rate somehow in town, and this would instantly do it. But is it the right way to do it? Probably not. Okay. And further looking at this, are we really ever going to get to the point where residential ratepayers are going to pay less than 85% of the town's taxes? I don't know if we're ever going to get there. I looked up, I remember reading it before, a study by the Newport Daily News that shows the 50 top taxpayers in the town of Portsmouth. And you would think Raytheon is number 1, but it's not actually the electric company, you know, which is a lot of tangible equipment. But Raytheon, and for the tax year 2022, paid $542,000 in real estate taxes and an additional $304,000 in tangibles. So also we've got the City of Water, Newport Water, followed by Bayview Estates. But of those top 49, I only counted 49 on here. 20 of them are actually residential. And those residential properties, a lot of them are down at the Indian Avenue areas, Carnegie Harbor, Court Drive, Black Point Lane, et cetera. They're paying anywhere from up to $65,000 in yearly taxes in 2022. So without those people, we'd be paying a heck of a lot more. We talked about a big fear being whether we would, if we increase the commercial rate, we would push the Raytheons out of town here. I think that's something that, you know, there are a lot of tax money. They do employ a lot of people here in town. Certainly probably not as many as they did 10, 20 years ago. And whether, you know, it's going to be their choice, whether that building is too big for the amount of employees they have. They may want to move on already anyways. We don't know that. We don't have that crystal ball. But certainly if we had to start making up $800,000 in tax revenue, we'd be in trouble here. You know, maybe we are banking on just high dollar houses in town. I'm not really sure. But getting back to where I started with this thing, if we were to have a lower increase in the mill rate, where we kept the two residential and the commercial within $1 each of each other, it would still significantly bring down the residential tax rate and slightly affect the commercial rate. And I would agree, the only way you're going to find out is by looking into that. Mr. Katzman, on your letter that I read, you know, you didn't quite say a whim, but basically I'm grasping for straws to try and find a way to ease the burden for the residential taxpayer. So I totally admit to that. In fairness to Matt, he said, I wish you'd given me a heads up. And I said, well, I didn't tell him at the time, but I'd only thought about it the day before, only because, you know, desperate measures call for desperate times. Reverse engineer that a little. But anyways, that's where this whole thing came from. I think that there's going to be, you know, I only saw the one letter from a small grocery owner in town here, and I agree with his statements. I can't argue with him, but we're always going to be affecting somebody with each change. And I don't know what the easy solution is, or if there is one, but perhaps through looking at getting it to the Portsmouth EDC, they might be able to weigh in on it. They do meet next Wednesday, I believe, and they could look at it and potentially get back to us for the next council meeting, just a thought. You know, I think if we wait until after the tax season is over, we've approved them, we're gonna be burdened with other projects. We've mentioned them already. This town needs a lot of work on the ordinances. And I think this council is gonna be spending a lot of time on that. But just my thoughts on the whole issue. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gleason. Mr. Levesque?
As some of you recall, I voted against this. I actually voted for the one on the tangible, which I hope is included in the idea that we may have a second thought on this. Because I think both ideas were troubling to me. There's two bases on which you can tax people. One is upon what they actually require from the community doing the taxing. The other is just on a flat, even basis. Historically, business community has not demanded much in services. And in fact, most of the time you see them at a net plus. The real draw down on cost are the residential properties. Now, not all residential properties demand the same amount of services. Many people have talked to me over my lifetime, as me. I did not have any children in school, which is a significant contribution you make to the community. One that I think you're obliged to make to the community, but nonetheless, you could say, I am not drawing that service, so why should I pay for it? So I think it's only really fair to treat everybody equally, fairly, in any regard when you're doing something like this. I would point out, I just did the math, and I think the math is correct. And Mr. Hamilton is always pointing out, and I think Mr. Fitzmaurice, it's the incremental increases each year as you do it. But if we even went for the 5% change, 5.56, 54, excuse me, on a $250,000, which they've been $13. $500,000, obviously you can do the math from there, it's the same. So it would not be, I think, a significant value to that individual homeowner, other than the fact that, as you say, it's upon a previous 13 or 14 or 15 years. The amount that we were considering doing to commercial, and I agree entirely with Councilwoman Abbott. I think the council did very much in good faith say the residential had been hit very hard by the statistical revaluation. It was our belief that the commercial business and the intangibles or the tangibles had not. So that in a manner of fairness, as the whole levy was going to be going up, I mean, excuse me, the whole evaluation was going to be going up, there was going to be a saving to the business commercial community just by virtue of how high the residential went. So that on a dollar-to-dollar basis, the argument could be made that they will in fact not only be no worse off, but they'll probably be better off. That is, they will be paying less dollars in taxes. But it still goes back to the basic premise. They don't cost more in services. They should be either given a credit for that, or we should try to just treat everybody evenly, fairly, regardless of what other things they're doing within the community. I'm not really interested at this point in following up on this at all. I don't think it's a particularly good idea. And I read, as I think Mr. Katzman did, some stuff about homestead exemptions. They're valuable in terms of going into bankruptcy, but I'm not sure they're that valuable in terms of tax rates. And they would have the same effect of putting the burden on somebody else. So at this point, again, I think everybody acted in good faith. I think everybody had, a sense of just trying to deal with the responses we were getting from the residents in town, the concern they have. It's our obligation to listen to that concern
I think we listened to it. I just don't think this was the appropriate way to respond to it. And I think that, as my father used to say, very few good deeds go unpunished. Right, Mr. Green? So I'm going to vote against any sort of proposed change and would ask my colleagues to do so too.
Thank you, Mr. Levesque. Hold on one second, Doc. Did you?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to respond.
I'm trying to keep order, but I appreciate everybody's raising their hand, so, yeah, I do appreciate
Actually,
that.
technically, I raised
My-
a
my
finger.
cousin-
Finger,
Yeah, smile.
I noticed, but.
Right, but it was a good finger, so. Anyway, I obviously, Mr. Gleason's put a great deal of thought into this, so thank you. It strikes me that, and yes, we've only heard from one small business, grocery store. But have you gone into any of the town's restaurants recently? One hears from the owners if they know you. So what I'm, the way I'm looking at this, the people who live here obviously have a huge investment in the future of this town. And so the residents of this town have the most stake in the town, but so do people, so do small businesses. They have a great deal, their businesses are located here. Their livelihoods are here. So they have a great deal invested in this community. And they're already being hit with tangible taxes, which fall largely on them, restaurants, for instance, with all the equipment they have. So we're taxing them for tangible taxes. We're also going to be taxing them for commercial taxes. Echoing sentiments that have already been said, I think we really need to look into the two-tier system that places like Newport have, because part of what jacks up real estate values around here is the fact that there are many people with deep pockets. Mr. Hamilton seems to identify them coming from Boston and New York, but they could be coming from somewhere else. Coming in here and buying houses as investments, as Airbnbs, or sometimes just flipping them. And when you have that much money pouring into the town, for people who essentially have almost no investment in the health of this community, I think it makes sense to tax that at a higher rate, since, we do not want to drive our businesses out of town, small ones. We certainly want to drive out Raytheon. I'm not sure that our, given their gross profits, our tax on them is going to amount to much, but certainly punishing people who have an investment in the town, who live here, who work here. I would rather see an increase in taxes on people who are just using our property as an investment, but otherwise have very little to do with the town. That's just my feeling on the matter.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
Just
Okay.
responding. I mean, I'm not entirely sold on like adjusting numbers here and there in the rate today either, because I don't think there is like a clear right answer. But I do think that at face value, I don't think it's appropriate for us to raise taxes on residential property owners by 5.5% while giving others a tax break. I think that should be capped at 4%. And then we adjust the other numbers accordingly. And if I'm doing math now, they haven't finished it, but I think they'd still get a tax break. So I think that, to me, that's what is kind of irksome, is that we have this 4% cap that we're getting to overall, but we're doing it at the expense of residential properties. And I think, I think that we can do better than that. That said, if it really requires a change in ordinance, I think some of the things discussed here in terms of the tier system are all great suggestions. And since we're going to be undertaking a big review of our ordinances, I think now would be the right time to consider those and see if we can set up our tax structure so that next time there's a huge discrepancy in revaluations. This time, just to reiterate, I think on average, residential revaluations came in 30% higher than they were, which is a lot for people to swallow, right? If that were to happen again, we'd like to at least have the flexibility to set our tax levy in a way that is a little bit more equitable. And anyway, I think that's all I have to say. I'm not happy. I think that 5.5% is not okay. I think we could do better, but if our hands are tied, then I think we should put things in place so we can do it differently next time.
Thank you, Ms. Abbott. All right, at this point, I think we're going to open it up. Mr. Hamilton?
Yeah.
I thought he said.
I mean, I'll make one quick comment. I mean, it's the 5% increase is on the levy. Because of the value of the homes have gone up so appreciatively and commercial properties didn't go up as much. The difference to me with the tangible tax is tangible tax through accounting whiz banging. You can write some of that off. And we also didn't go in and reassess people's tangible property. The commercial property, the residential property got reassessed through the evaluation process. Tangibles did not. And that's why, and also tangible taxes is having a rebate given back by the state if a certain law passes. So there'll be an adjustment for folks with the tangible tax as well. But the levy went up 5.5%. And I think, of course, we're hearing from the people and, you know, me being one of them, whose residential rate went up significantly. But remember, there was 30% roughly who stayed about the same, 30% went really high and 30% went down. Guaranteeing we're not going to hear from those 30%.
True. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. We'll open up. You guys can fight over who wants to go first. The duel in the parking lot. You need a sponsor? Wait a minute, who are you? Thank you, Mr. Grebe.
Why I couldn't make any sense out of that one. If you take the mill rate times the commercial property that's in the budget, you don't get taxes, the levy in it. The reason you get that is you've added $80 million more to the already $325 million that was in the commercial. So when you see a 20% increase in the tax levy, that's really even. It's not a 20% increase in the taxes to the individual commercial residents or commercial owners. It's even. There is no increase when you see 20% or 19%. So you're right in the right area, I believe, to do what Ms. Abbott, and I 100% agree with her, wants to do.
Mr. Grebe, I'm sorry, can you hold on for a quick second? Can you check his microphone? Because I don't think it's working. It's not coming through the,
Okay, it wasn't pushed on. Sorry.
I'm getting a complaint from somebody named Nancy, but I'm sure you don't know who that is.
Can you shut her microphone? Anyway, the $80 million that was put on to the commercial net asset value of 325. It's about 20%. So that when you see a 20% increase in the levy, having added 20% more property, it makes sense that you've held it even. That's the point that I'm making. And that you actually probably are right at about the right spot in the mill rate for the commercial properties. So I think this is a very doable. If you look at it holistically, it's a very doable thing to do. I don't think creating the ordinance would be a very hard thing. You just have to put in the right categories. Now, I want to talk, first of all, I think Ms. Abbott did it exactly right. You don't want to have one class of assets getting a 12% break when you're breaking the arms of the residents with a 5.5. And if it wasn't for Mr. Hamilton, that was up to 6.2. So that was a huge increase. It can be done.
The other thing is, and Mr. Levesque made an excellent point. Mr. Cashman made excellent points. We have commercial properties operating under a residence, and that's not fair. They can raise what they get, Airbnbs can raise what they're getting for their properties when Ms. Abbott can't. That's the sort of thing that we need to be looking at to make things fair. That's a commercial operation, whether we want to, admit it or not. It's a commercial operation. And it should be charged commercial rates, especially as the rates go up. And Dr. Ryan was absolutely right. They have very little ties to the town. They don't care. So those are the things that you need to look at. But I want to tell you that I think you're very, very close to something that could be very helpful to the residences, getting that rate down from the 5.5% to maybe the 3% range, and keeping the commercial rates even. And the reason you're seeing, again, last time, the reason you're seeing the 19 to 20% is because you've added 19 to 20% to the net asset value. It's not because you're charging these people more. You're charging more people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grebe. Ms. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. I'm going to be a little less esoteric than Mr. Grebe. I want to speak directly to why the taxes are going up. I mean, why the tax levy is going up so much. And that is because we're growing our budget very quickly. And the equation in all of this is the valuation, which is now by law fixed December 31st of 22, the valuation on that date. It can't be changed by law. And then you use the mill rate. In many cases, we've talked about mill rates, but say the current one in the bidding at 12.787 for the residential property, and you multiply the two together and you get the taxes. So that's the equation. The valuation is not going to change. The mill rate can change in order to change the outcome taxes. There's another factor, however, and that is the size of the budget. So those are the factors involved here. Council's not even considering economizing on the budget. So, but I'm going to mention it. I'd like to point out the last 2 years, last year, this year, and the proposed year, what the levy is in increase for the residential properties. In 22, it was 1 million. That's an increase. The total was 51 million. So it increased 1 million. In 23, the current year, it increased 1.5 million. In this year, it's increasing roughly 3 million. So you see the trend here. We're ramping up the taxes a lot, and we've ended up in a long discussion pitting one tax group against another, residential against commercial real estate, and to some extent tangibles. So that's the problem. This is a very high increase, even after Mr. Hamilton's reduction. I did go back and look at the tax increases on the residential property for the last 10 years. Generally speaking, we're getting higher taxes, although not in every year, than we had 10 years ago. So there's an upward ramp. But the highest increase in residential property taxes of any year was 2021, fiscal year 20 and 21. And that was 4.38%. That's the highest we've seen. I suspect if I went further back, it wouldn't improve any. This would still remain the higher one. Now, some people will say, well, that's higher than the cap, and that is true, but the cap is calculated against all three of the categories that we've been talking about tonight: residential, commercial real estate, and tangible property. So you add them all together and you do the math and you come out, and we are still under the cap. But we have a 5.5, in my number, 5.55% increase in the proposed residential property taxes. That is a historical high. I say that again, we're very high on the taxes, and there's reasons for that, and that is we're spending more money. That's the real driver here. And we need to take a look at options for saving some money in the budget and not rule it out altogether as a discussion. But I think I join virtually all the members of the council that have spoken tonight in my reluctance to pit one tax group against another. I agree that all three, I agree with Mr. Gleason, that all three of the proposals are far too high for commercial real estate. We need to find another path. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzmaurice.
Evening, how are you? Craig Clark, 701 Park Ave, Portsmouth. I'm also the owner of Ocean State Air Solutions, 1844 East Main Road, and our new property at 3076 East Main Road. 22 years ago, I think it was, I was on the Economic Development Committee in Portsmouth. And as Mr. Levesque mentioned, it was, businesses at that point, the ratio was for every dollar a business brings in, it costs 70 cents in services. For every dollar for residential, $1.30 in services. So our intentions 22 years ago or so was, how do we get more businesses in Portsmouth? And as a person that just was able to find his own property and building a property, everything else, I can't stress enough how extremely difficult it is to find a property and start a business in Portsmouth or grow a business in Portsmouth. So my only advice to the council or to the town in general is we have to identify another 100-acre property, 50 acres, whatever it is, make another industrial park. This one's built out basically. So where is that? How are we going to offset that commercial to residential? We have to take some significant changes in that and make it happen, because that's the only way to offset this cost we're talking about with residential. So I just wanted to say that, and I appreciate the sentiment. It is difficult running a business, but I really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Ms. Abbott?
I was just gonna respond to the comment about the budget being high. I think with historic inflation, as we've seen, at 7% or not, we've actually done a pretty excellent job of reining in our budget and keeping things under check. We haven't really added services, and I don't think anyone wants us cutting services. So I think, there really isn't, the budget at this point is what it is. But looking at the numbers, I do think there is some options if we don't move any of the levy from one column to the other, one category to the other, and don't work on recategorizing stuff and cap the residential rate at 4%. I think there's a pretty happy medium there where nobody gets hit extra hard. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
My name's Arthur Smith. I'm 54 Narragansett Boulevard. I've lived here 47 years. And the taxes keep going up and up and up. And what you do is you keep spending, spending, spending. So I got my reevaluation. It's gone up considerably. And the rate, of course, is not going down. So I anticipate that my taxes are going to go up considerably. After living here 47 years, I'm making a decision to get out of this corrupt little town. And that's about all I have to say.
Mr. Levesque?
Leaving aside the fact that I don't believe we're in a corrupt little town. We are certainly little. Yes. If you look at any sort of comparison between a purchase of any kind from 1960 to 1970 to 1980, you would see that the prices, you used to buy a car for $3,000. My parents bought their house actually in 1954, and I think it cost them $8,000. Okay, 1964. Inflation, things going up, it has been happening. I don't agree with Mr. and Mr. Fitzmaurice at all. We are not profligate at all. Quite frankly, the administrator, much to his credit, has wrangled a budget that is below the state mandate of 4%, even though the state, because of our statistical reevaluation, because of the fact that our property values went up so high, have decreased the amount of money they're giving us. They're essentially saying, you've been so successful, we're not going to give you all the money we have historically given you. And they're going to say next year the same thing. And the administrator found a way to make that work. I will tell you right now, I intend to come back to this council at some point and ask that we restore some of that money. Or not restore it as such, but the cap is 4%. We came in at 3.75%, even though the state has taken money away from us. If you were here for the school department budget, you will see that they actually cut programs that are designed to help kids keep staying in school. Make the transition. No offense, survive. And let me tell you, having been at a state budget things, the cost of sending somebody to the training school is over $100,000. The cost of having somebody incarcerated at the ACI, over $100,000. Not only do you have the human tragedy of the person not having a life, you have that cost to the community, and that person isn't contributing. That person isn't helping the community by working and providing something. So we can pay now or we can pay later. I'm going to ask my colleagues, especially with those programs that are designed to keep people who are in danger within the system and give them the leg up that they need, keep going, that we look at it and perhaps address it. But we have not been profligate. We have done, and everybody had the budgets. Everybody could come here and tell us what they wanted to do with the fire department, what they wanted to do with public works, what they wanted to do. I sat here and nobody gave me anything other than, in all sincerity, Mr. Hamilton, everybody cross-trained. All right, not entirely a bad idea, but I wasn't happy with them that night, so I told them I didn't think it was a good idea. But that was about the only real suggestion that I recalled getting to cut this budget. So please.
Thank you, Ms. Levesque. Okay, we've obviously had a lot of discussion tonight. I don't think we're gonna solve the problem tonight. We've heard some very good suggestions, and maybe the one that needs to be looked at and how to go about it might be more along the lines of that of a tiered system where we're looking at the folks that are using their residential properties as a business with the Airbnb and how that's factored in. I know other communities do it. I've always been a supporter of the small business ever since my time on the zoning board. It's very hard for businesses to to the smaller businesses. It's very hard for them to establish themselves in Portsmouth, and a lot of it has to do with our lack of infrastructure. And that's, I know we say it a lot, but it's the reality. It's very expensive for commercial septic systems. And that's why you'll see that the majority of our land that was once commercial or industrial has gone by the wayside, and it's become high-end residential living because it comes down to the highest and best use of the land. And people will pay to have a water view from their bedroom, whereas a business owner really doesn't care if he has a water view for his employees. So we could not draw the businesses in. And that's been something that this town has struggled with for, I'm going to say, at least the last 25 years that I've been involved with the town. So this is something we have to evolve into. We are a residential community, and people are taking advantage of that island, of our views, in order to, to benefit from it. So yeah, I think we do have to take a harder look. Where we go tonight, that's not on our agenda. What we were looking at tonight was some alternative suggestions that Mr. Rayner and staff have put together. I think we all agree that it's too much of a hit to go this route on a commercial property. So I don't know where we go tonight. I'm open to any suggestions from counselors. But I also think an ordinance change and that kind of anything along that line is going to take time. And I don't think it would do us any good to try to fit something into this budget cycle. I think maybe we need to think this through and look at how do we set ourselves up for our next budget, and what do we need to put in place, to make sure that we're addressing it moving forward, as opposed to we've got 6 weeks or whatever it is in this budget cycle. And if we start to make changes and it's, we're sitting here at the beginning of May. Mr. Rayner's already done a lot of work to revamp things for a June deadline. I don't think is going to be in our best interest. But I will listen to my colleagues.
Me personally, I think we've already passed a provisional budget at 12,787. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of changing the commercial tax rate that is going to be a lot heavier lifting than just changing a number. And I think looking at all of the different options, whether it's homestead, whether it's tiered tax systems, whether it's adjusting the rates going forward next year, and all the information that we have to do that is absolutely worthwhile, and we should do it starting July 1st.
Mr. President, yeah, I would concur. Right now, our situation is that we have no motion on the floor. I suggest we don't make one. And I just want to concur with Mr. Hamilton that however we move forward, however swiftly, I'm not prepared to do anything about it tonight.
Mr. Levesque?
So, Mr. Administrator and Council, at the end of our budget deliberations, there was a discussion with regard to changing the rate for one group of things, and we voted on that and voted in favor of that. Then there was a discussion, multiple discussions about 3 tiers of taxation for residential. Do we need a motion going forward to have everybody at a flat level so that we can advertise and go to a budget hearing, given that we actually tentatively approved some changes?
No, what I'm hearing tonight is you're going to keep your commercial and your residential rates the same. The tangible, I'll defer to Matt Halpin, but I believe you have to pass an ordinance regardless of what you voted on previous, because every year you have to,
I realize that, but it has to go out to advertisement for the public hearing. Is that correct?
that part is correct. Absolutely. Yes. And we will do that.
So I wonder whether.
Well, that's why we had to have this meeting tonight, because we're running up against the block, the stop blocks here. So I'm sure this week, Jen's getting ready to go. That's one of the reasons why Heather is sitting here, but we'll get the advertisement out today. or I'm sorry, this week.
So is the advertisement going to be flat for all of the properties?
No, it will be 12.787 for residential commercial, and then the 15.651 for tangible.
All right, I would like to discuss that. I mean, that was part of the plan
But I
that was put forward.
think you already voted on that, or the first.
Yeah.
We did add the tentative approval.
As you provisionally approved, so now the next step will be the public hearing. I would hear the council if you want to put it on the agenda. Absolutely, we can discuss it. I'll just keep.
Mr. Administrator, we did not tentatively approve any amount for the commercial at that meeting. We actually said we're gonna go forward to this discussion.
No, we did
You did.
on the last meeting, we provisionally approved holding the line at 12,787, 12,787, and 15,651.
Right.
Was the provisionally approved budget.
For the commercial and residential.
Correct.
Real estate will stay the same.
Real estate will say the thing,
The
the tangible.
tangible property that will remain at the old rate.
Which still gives them a tax break based on valuations. If you look at the
What's
spreadsheet,
that?
it still gives them a 4% tax break. If you look at the,
Plus,
breakdown.
plus they'll be receiving a tiered down system over the next 5 years.
The
That would-
plan, I mean,
It's.
nothing's been approved,
Right.
but it looks like in 5 years, it'll be like the motor vehicles, it'll be phased out, the tangible.
I don't think that, no, it's not gonna phase out. It's gonna hold that $250,000.
Of
Uh,
assessed value will be phased out.
The car repeal was first talked about when I was in the
You're preaching to
legislature in
the choir.
1989.
Yeah,
So it takes some time for these things to happen. And quite frankly, I think they may be realizing it was not a good idea. Okay,
it was a good idea, but keeping it at a fixed rate was a bad idea. So whatever our number was, $2.5 million in reimbursement stays at $2.5 million in reimbursement. There is no escalator built into the state law. My understanding is they're going to build an escalator into the tangible tax one, but that is
and
wait till we
getting
see.
back actually to some points that were raised. One of the reasons that we are facing a little bit of a draw against us is that we are fixed at a particular point for the value of our cars and getting paid for it. And that's fixed like 5 years ago, or whatever. it was.
Even if you buy a brand new car.
Right. So, I mean, in a way, that's less money than the town would get if we were still able to tax our cars.
Right, we would just be changing the tax from somebody's automobile to their house. So I mean, it's still
Which
taxing the
is what we don't
taxpayer.
wanna do.
Well, it's still taxing the taxpayer. We need to find alternative sources of revenue.
Well, we actually have a bunch of people with guns down at the police station. We could have them robbing banks. But otherwise, it's taxation. Now, Mr. Administrator, Mr. Tax, you are satisfied that at least on the residential, on all real property, we have a vote for advertisement. And the only distinction would be Mr. Hamilton's motion that was approved 7-0, because I was slow. No comment? Nope. All right. And that will go out to advertisement also, is that correct?
Part's correct, yes.
What's that?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Gleason.
I have a question, still backwards here, going backwards in time. Sorry, guys, gals. While you're standing there, Matt, statement was made tonight by a citizen that the reason why those numbers were large on the commercial side of the increase, 20%, 32%, was because of the $80 million. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, because we're going to a classification system, then you have to go by what's mandated by the state.
Right.
And the state has the classifications where our apartments, 5 units and more, and the combination properties move from residential to commercial.
So the whole rate increases for all commercial people by that total increase. So some people that are seeing their,
It's the levy amount that will change.
that's,
I mean,
Trying
if
to-
you keep the tax rate the same.
Yep.
The impact is gonna be the same as it was based on the reval.
So to that theory, sorry, Mr. Gleason, but
That's fine.
Raytheon would see a tax increase. But Bayview Estates would go from a residential property to a commercial property
Right.
and see a significant increase. And which
Correct.
would
So
then
the-
increase the rents on all those individuals.
So to Mr. Greaves' point, you'll have more people paying. You're gonna have more people who were paying residential real estate tax rates to a commercial rate. So there's your difference. And that's why you're seeing in those charts that I put up, you're seeing the estimated certification rates going up quite significantly, which obviously changes the levy amount for that commercial. So it's not that as I stated in the beginning, this is a zero-sum game. You take something from one pile, the big pile has to stay the same. You got to put it in another pile. So one pile is going to get bigger. We're going to get more money from one area and less money from another, but it's a zero-sum game.
Just for my clarification, if we are gonna have different rates for different kinds of properties, we have to have a classification system. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And what happens is, we did a reval, so we can just do it by ordinance. If we decide this upcoming year, we'll have to go to the assembly to get the enabling legislation, which Middletown just did. I don't, it seems like it's not that big of a.
Middletown can do it. So the Rosetta Stone actually went a little bit from hieroglyphics to higher math. And here we are.
So just out of curiosity, sorry, and you might not know the answer to this. I'd have to do a little forensic accounting here to figure it out, but what would the commercial rate be going up by for a property that didn't get reclassified? Like, I know that 32% increase, if we keep the rate the same, is a little misleading because we have more people
Comparing
paying.
apples and oranges.
We're comparing apples and oranges.
You're-
So
you're-
what I'm having a hard time is that we're not really comparing apples and apples anywhere
but-
here. And what I really have a problem with is that 5.5% increase on residential properties because
Sure, that's obviously that's the way the system works, but he's absolutely right. You're talking apples and oranges. So yes, the levy went up 5%. The valuations went up 30%. That's where the difference comes from. So you have tax rates, you have tax levies. You set the levy, all right? The levy is based on what you need. When you take away everything that comes in as revenue from the state or any other source, ball fields, it doesn't matter. Add that all up. The difference between that and what your expenditures are going to be, that has to be the levy. And as I've stated year over year over year, the tax rate, when you go back over 20 years, is actually declined when you take into account the inflation value of money. I put up in the very first slide, the very first night, the inflation value over 20 years has been cumulative 64%. So we're not a corrupt little town. We are a town that is doing everything we can to keep spending under control. The tax or the overall budget went up less than 2% over the previous year in an era of 8 to 7% inflation. So while it is a hard pill to swallow that some people, it's tough. When we look at these numbers and we're looking at 5% increase in the levy on residential real estate, it's tough. And there are things that can be changed, but if you're going to do it, you take away from Peter, you got to pay Paul. If you're going to lower the residential rate, you're going to increase the commercial rate. If you're going to increase the commercial rate, the residential rate will come down, but it won't come down anywhere near as much as you expect. It's only a few dollars. Because the value of that real estate is so high. It's astronomical. We have such a disparity between the amount of net asset value of our commercial property and our residential property. And everybody talked about it tonight. This is where people want to come. And there are decisions that have been made in the past that make it very difficult for commercial business to succeed in Portsmouth. We don't have the land area. We do have a lot of land that has easements on it. We don't have the utilities. We don't have the water hookups. We don't have the sewer.
Yep. Wrap it up.
Well said. We are actually, I think, 85–90% residential in this town. So basically, just by proportion, you're almost never going to be able to get the money from some other source. And I agree with you. I think there are any number of things we could do within the current framework. Because people like this town, they like the way it is. We've talked about sewer since my father got water here, okay, in the 50s. But there are other things. We could hone our zoning, we could hone our everything to make it more plausible and practical to move in here. Okay, with the infrastructure we have, with what we have. Okay, but well said. And I did mean it when I said you did yeoman service. And I do resent it when somebody suggests you didn't. That doesn't necessarily mean I agree to Tyler.
Okay, so then there's no action on this item? There's no action, so we're gonna move on to new business. New business number 1, it's request council approval auditor selection for follow-on submission to the Auditor General for state approval to contract with selected auditing firm. Mr. Rayner? Oh.
Well, what you have before you in the backup, we did receive, first off, this RFP is regulated by the State Auditor General. It's a very regulated process that has to be followed to the T. We received Auditor General approval of the bid specifications in early March. We did receive bids from 2 firms, Markham LLP and Haig Sahadi, who is our current auditor. The bottom line is that the bid packages were evaluated. They were in accordance with the guidelines for audit bids set by the Auditor General. And there's about a little less than $100,000 difference between the 2 bids. Markham came in high, 282. Haig Sahadi came in at 189. So we therefore recommend contracting with Haig Sahadi and Company as our auditing firm for fiscal years 23, 24, 25. These are 3-year contracts, and every 3 years you have to bid them out. And of course, your concurrence would be subject to final Rhode Island Auditor General approval.
Mr. President, I move that we give approbation to the selection of Haig.
Sahadi.
and Company for auditing.
Second.
Before we go, comments? No. Come on up, Mr. Grieve.
I don't usually talk twice in one night, so I apologize, but I got an epiphany when Mr. Gleason was talking. It's Tom Grieve, 110 Thayer Drive again. It's a good general principle for an organization to change auditors from time to time. It provides a fresh look at the organization. But there are additional reasons to change our present auditor. The very first year this auditor changed numbers after sending their report to the state at the town administration request. That is on video. 3 out of the last 4 audit reports have restated the general fund balance of the prior year. The general fund balance is arguably the most important number in the audit report. It is the amount of cash on hand for emergencies. It is a prime measure of the town's financial health. It also figures in the town's bond rating. Think about 3 out of the last 4 reported general fund balance numbers being reported wrong in the audit. Several by about $1 million. Those accounting errors were not found and reported by the auditor in a timely fashion. One time, they did not even require the subsequent report to state that the cited starting balance had been restated. Were they hoping no one would notice? In 2020, the auditor certified that the pension return rate had not been changed when it had. The evidence needed was on the same page as the wrong return rate. Yet the auditor did not pick it up. It took residents until the next budget hearing to determine what was really wrong. Last year, there was a deficit of almost $1 million in the town capital fund due to accounting errors, which the auditor did not report. There was also no mention of the internal controls or what was needed to be changed. I could continue, but you get the idea. So I return to the general principle that it is a good idea to change auditors from time to time. They should not be considered legacy vendors. I think a new auditor would be a very good idea next year.
A few comments, Mr. Creed. It's my understanding that this was put out for RFP. And we only had two bidders on it. We've gone through the process. They've done their evaluation, and the recommendation at this point is for Haig Shahadi, and they are in the tune of about overall $90,000 less than the other firm. So
I see no reason why you couldn't go out for yet another RFP. I know there are other auditors out there that would welcome some new business.
how come they didn't respond when we put it out?
You'd have to ask them. I don't know, but there are certainly a lot of audit firms out there.
Well, the process was fair.
I didn't say it wasn't.
No,
No,
I know, but I
I'm
mean-
not saying that whatsoever.
I mean, I understand, I respect your position, Mr. Grieve. You've made your comments. And I'll defer to the council. Right now, we have a motion and a second on a recommendation. Any further?
And I would point out, without specific reasons, the law normally anticipates that we are going to award the contract to the low bid who meets the other qualifications and terms. And so $80,000 worth of litigation at a minimum would be the result of not voting, as I believe the administrator has suggested.
Any further questions, comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Katzman,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Abstain.
Mr. Hamilton.
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 6-0-1. Okay. Next item on our agenda. It's a request to donate the 1974 Prudence Island fire engine to the Bristol Fire Department. This was an engine that they donated to us, allowed us to use back in 2011.
Were we gifting?
Well, they've given it, we have another one that's gonna take its place. And so they've asked for this one back, and they will repurpose it for fundraising and.
All right, I move that we do return it to them, although not in the middle of the night. I want it during the day. Actually, Bristol, if you know, is an amazing community. Not that we can follow it, but all of their fire departments, I believe, still remain voluntary. And so when it says Bristol Fire Department benevolent, I believe all of them are nonprofit organizations that buy their stuff themselves. Am I wrong about that?
It's a volunteer fire department. I believe that the chief, assistant chief may be paid,
They pay, yeah.
and that there are stipends, but yes, they're operate much the same way that Prudence Volunteer Fire Department operates.
I'll second Mr. Levesque's motion.
We have a
In
motion
the middle of the night thing.
and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Katzman,
Aye.
Ms. Abbott,
Aye.
Mr. Gleason,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Levesque,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have correspondence.
Move that the correspondence be received.
Hold on. Johnson. Okay. Mr. Johnson? Did he have a question or just hand up? Mr. Johnson, can you hear us? Check, yeah, what's in the Q&A? Is there anything in there? All right, we'll try and. Mr. Johnson, he's a EDC. Right? All right, well. We have correspondence. A motion and a second.
Move that the correspondence be received and placed on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Next future meetings, our next regular council meeting is on May 22nd, followed by our May 25th workshop at the high school. Then June 12th, and then June 14th is our budget hearing, which is on a Wednesday. At the budget meeting, budget hearings here, town hall. It'll be here, yes.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Levesque?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you all. Good evening. See you in a couple.